Hello and welcome to another decisions training video. Today we are going to be discussing another Settings.Xml feature, the logging settings. So, for a refresher, if you haven't seen the other Settings.Xml videos, you can access the Settings.Xml that is typically saved in your Drive, Program Files, Decisions, Decision Server, and then Settings.Xml. This file path might be different if you are running decisions inside of a containerized environment. So, let's get into these logging settings. So inside of decisions, you have the ability to alter the logs that get recorded from the system. However, logging is not exclusively determined through the configuration of the decision settings.xml. It can also be configured inside of the platform under System, Administration, System Tools, and then selecting Logging. We are going to be going through both of these methods today, but first let me cover what different types of logging settings you can manipulate. The first kind is by having logs for particular categories getting logged to their own file. By default, Decisions records logs inside of decisions.web.core logs, and this encompasses all default logging categories. However, you can specify particular categories to be logged to their own file for ease of tracking and analyzing. Another thing you can do is determine which log levels are recorded. I will be demonstrating these levels when we get inside of our demo portion of this video, but it is important to note that you can choose which level of logging is actually recorded for particular logging categories. The next thing we can do is determine the log rollover criteria. This criteria is made up of two individual criterion, which are the log max file size and the number of retained logs of the decisions.web.core logs. That is to say, how big do you want the log to be before we roll over to the next log, and how many of these log files do we want in our backlog before we drop the oldest one. That's what you can determine both in the system settings and inside of the Settings.Xml. Now, going into Settings.Xml exclusive categories, you can determine what the criteria are for logging slow flow steps, API calls, and SQL database operations. That is to say, you can specify how long is too long before one of these operations gets recorded. And the last thing you can do is enable W3C logs, which is an entirely separate category on its own. So why would you want to alter the default logging settings in decisions? Well, there are two primary reasons why. The first is to capture errors, and the second is to improve performance. So in that first category, you'll typically want to categorize the errors that you're seeing so that you can identify what the cause of them is and be able to provide a solution. That's what the point of the categorization, altering the log rollover, and enabling W3C logs is about. The second reason is to improve performance. You may not have an error necessarily, but you may have a process that's taking a while. By using the keyword took, T-O-O-K, inside of your logs, you can find processes that took a particular time to execute. And you can specify the criteria of what counts as too slow in order to fetch those API request logs, those flow logs, or those SQL operation logs that are taking a while. You can also trim the size of the logs that you want to retain or how many you're retaining at once in order to save on disk space. So, I'm going to go over two different scenarios in which you would want to change the logs, and then we're going to go into our environment. So the first one is if you are trying to isolate particular logs, let's say SAML logs, in order to not have to dig through the data separately to find out what's going on. For example, maybe you are trying to have users log in through an identity provider and you want to track the SAML logs because some users are reporting they can't get into decisions. The SAML logs have a very high chance of capturing some of those errors. So we want to log them to their own file so that we can analyze those logs separately. So let me go over how you would set up logging to your own file in Decisions. Here we are inside of my Decisions environment. So we tried enabling SAML logs and we didn't find anything. So this time we are going to log the account logs to their own file. And the way that we do that is by navigating to our System tab, dropping down Administration, System Tools, and then selecting Logging. Here we can see all of the logs that are getting recorded in Decisions. These logs are the logs that are captured in the most recent Decisions.Web.Core log files. When those log files roll over, these logs captured in the Decisions environment also roll over. So you only see the logs from the most recent file in the logging report. So in order for us to log a category to its own file, we need to right-click the Logging tab, and then we're going to select Edit Log Settings. These are the default logs that are getting captured in Decisions. You'll notice there are 6 of them: verbose, debug, information, warning, error, and fatal. In order for us to select a logging category to log to its own file, we want to hit the plus button on the logging categories. Here, I'm going to look for the account category. After I select that, I actually want to record debug logs in addition to warning, error, and fatal to see if that gives us any more clues. Now keep in mind, debug, verbose, and information logs can fill up very fast. So you want to be very aware and also be mindful of how long you are enabling these kinds of logs in your environment. I'm going to log these to their own file, and I'm going to hit OK. Afterwards, I'll hit OK on this, and that will now update the logs in our Decisions environment for the account. So let me show you what that looks like in our folder path. So I've navigated to the folder path where the logs get stored by default in Decisions, which is under your Drive, Program Files, Decisions, Decisions Server, and then you select the logs file. Now, if you're running a multi-tenant server, within the logs you will see individual folders that each capture the logs for that particular tenant. So in our case, we are not running a multi-tenant server, and you would see the logs here. Here's my account log. When I click on this, here's what the account log looks like. I have a bunch of debug logs, as you can see in here, with no particular errors, claiming different things that are going on with the account. In particular, there's only one account accessing this instance, so it's only going to be talking about one account. Therefore, don't expect to see a lot of logs here at the moment. But this is how you would separate logging categories into their own files to be investigated and to promote good troubleshooting. All right, now let's say that you actually wanted to adjust for a slower performing query that you know takes a while, but you don't want your logs flooding with details about this query taking a while. So maybe you want to change the default time that is needed for a query to be recorded in the logs to a longer time, so that only those operations which are taking an excessive amount of time are getting recorded. Well, let me show you how to do that within the Decisions Settings.Xml right now. So here we are inside of the Settings.Xml. So if I want to alter the criteria for which logs are captured for processes that take a while, there are 3 different spots that I can do that. The first one is here, where I can choose to log SQL statements that take more than 5 seconds. Here, I can log API calls that take more than 5 seconds. And then here, I can log flow steps that take more than 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds. So if I have an API call that I know is going to take a while, I don't necessarily want the logs filled with that API call that continues to run for longer than 5 seconds. So I would alter this line, let's say to 15 seconds. Then I need to make sure that I save this, and it's going to have me save it as an admin running this particular Notepad++. Keep in mind that you need to run these programs in administrator mode in order to properly make the changes and saves that you need. Now, the last thing we need to do is restart the Decisions service. Since I have installed Decisions on my local install as a self-hosted or Kestrel hosted server, I can do that from my Services tab. If you have installed via IIS, you will need to go to the IIS manager and perform the restart there, or perform it by running a command in the command prompt. So I'm going to restart this, and once this is done, my changes will take effect. Keep in mind that for all changes to the Settings.Xml, you must perform a restart in order for those changes to update. This does not apply to the logging settings that we were setting inside of the web application earlier in this video. So, once this updates, API calls will need to take at least 15 seconds in order to get logged. Thank you very much for watching. Hope this helped.